Namaskaram everyone. Welcome to another episode of our podcast. We'll be discussing the future of XR in enterprise. We'll be discussing how XR is reshaping the way businesses operate, collaborate, and innovate, and much more about it. So, for that, today we have a really special guest, Thirukumaran. He's the AVP Head, Business Development, Enterprise XR at RR Donnelley. He is the former co-founder and chief business officer of XR Labs, wherein he led sales and delivery of solutions worth close to 6 million USDs for several Fortune 500. So, welcome.
Thank you, Pooja, for this opportunity and your time today. Let's get started.
Sure. Just to set the context first, so you have been in the industry for long. How do you see the industry grow in the last 5 years?
Okay, so let's do a quick recap, right? So, my journey in the enterprise space of virtual reality and augmented reality, which I think we can call XR now, right? Started back in 2014, and thankfully we had the idea to focus purely on the B2B space back then, because the consumer market was, the AjnaLens wasn't there yet. Many other consumer AR/VR devices that you see today was not even in the horizon back then, right? So, me myself being an engineer and my co-founder being an engineer as well, we wanted to kind of like take this to the real world applications, and those kind of problems that can, at that point of time, due to the cost of the hardware and the software development, can sort of like afford XR solutions were all mostly in the enterprise space, right? Maybe affordance is not the right word. Maybe value for money was more in the enterprise space, right? Uh, because let's face it, right? I mean, AR/VR devices for the longest time have been clunky. You had to have a learning curve to use them. They needed to be charged often. A lot of other constraints around them, which for consumer market it wouldn't have been very easy to get started with. But for enterprise, as long as it solves a problem, these kind of issues doesn't matter because the devices are going to be shared and they will get their own time to charge it and various other things. The learning curve can be covered by an actual training session, etc. But you're not going to sit for a training session when you buy a new TV. You expect it to work very easily and seamlessly. But these kind of expectations are not there in the enterprise world. So naturally, for the technology itself, enterprise was and is actually the biggest driver of their growth.
Yeah.
So coming back to your question about the last 5 years, specifically, last 5 years is what, 2018. So let's shift that timeline a bit, right? Let's kind of make it like pre-COVID and post-COVID. So I like to believe it does feel like it's 5 years since COVID. We're almost there though. So pre-COVID, the kind of investments that you see in XR was more like, okay, you know what, let's try it. Let's try and see what's happening because there was business as usual. Um, there was not a need to kind of like re-look into the process that were already there, no matter how inefficient they are. The process of training people, the process of selling things, the process of visualizing designs, they were all there. They were all working. I wouldn't say with the best of efficiencies, but the inefficiency at that point of time didn't matter at all. But then came COVID. The traditional ways were not just inefficient anymore, they were just unviable. You couldn't get people into a classroom to train them. You couldn't get products in front of the customer to sell it to them, and so on. So, suddenly the perspective on XR shifted from it's a good to have versus it's a should have, must have kind of a perspective. And there's been a great difference in the market as well because earlier when companies used to pilot XR projects, they used to start with a couple of products, a couple of SKUs, a very, very shallow entry into the domain. But then now today you see even the very first pilots being in the tune of tens of devices and hundreds of devices in some cases. So it's been a great difference between the pre-COVID era and the post-COVID era.
So as we know that the XR has gained popularity majorly because of gaming and entertainment, and but how can we harness this technology for non-entertainment purposes like what we are discussing today is enterprise sector. So how can we use it for enterprise sector?
Absolutely. So the answer to that question is quite long. I'm unsure if we can cover that in this particular session. But let's start from the any value chain, right? And for For better context, let's take an example of the automotive industry, right? Uh, so the entire process of automotive industry, starting from design of an automobile and design verification of it, like does it look good, is it ergonomical, etc., and then design verification of the manufacturing process. Can my current factory support this? Training people on the manufacturing to the end-to-end manufacturing, right, from press shop to inspection, the full whole process, to selling it to the customers, etc., to even troubleshooting them as a roadside assistance, or let's say somebody wants to change a tire in the middle of a highway, or the garage is unfamiliar with this particular model and they want help. XR is touching each of these journey points, right? It is being used in design to quickly verify the prototypes in the immersive world, so you can check the ergonomics, you can check the look and feel, the style, etc., without having to spend time and money on building wax and wood prototypes, or now 3D printing prototypes. And then you save time and money in kind of iterating the manufacturing process entirely in the virtual world, seeing if it develops any joint pain for the worker to assemble a particular part in a certain way. Because imagine, like, even a very slight inconvenience repeated over 1,000 times a day, which is what the worker is going to do, can cause severe issues and injuries, right? So testing the manufacturing process is also happening in the virtual world, and the manufacturing fit is also being checked. Like, can my current jig support these new frame of mechas on them? And you can quickly check them in AR. And then you go into manufacturing training. You have a lot of people who needs to be trained on this new model that you're introducing, and globally, right? You're not just launching it in one factory. You're going to launch it in multiple factories in a very short span of time. So how do you train all these people quickly on these new SOPs? And like I mentioned, the showroom experience, do customers really have to walk into a showroom to see a car and the interiors of it, etc.? They can now see it in web showrooms, AR showrooms, and of course, virtual reality showrooms as well. And then moving on to the final leg of the customer experience, which is the ownership experience, the troubleshooting experience. I'm pretty sure about 50% of car owners today do not know how to change a flat tire. So how about an AR instruction manual for them? Regardless of where they are, they can just quickly whip out their phone and point at the car and tells you where is the jack, how do you set it up, how do you change the wheel, and so on. Right? This is just a very high level example of what XR is doing for the enterprise world today. And that's just one example in one vertical, and you can then scale it up to different verticals that are out there, different brands that are out there, so on. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's also talk about from the perspective of enterprises. So, are they readily adopting these XR solutions? If they are not adopting, what is the reason that you can elaborate on?
So I think the question no longer is about adoption. It's kind of like adoption at scale.
Mhm.
Any organization today, I'm pretty sure, would have dabbled with the XR solutions at some point of their journey in the last 5 years. They could have done a pilot or two, but the problem of scale comes in because, unlike an enterprise application ecosystem where you have the deployment and security kind of handled as given today, the guidelines for these is not really out there yet for the XR solutions. Take an automobile company, for example, and let's say they have 5 plants across 5 locations, right? Okay, great. You have done a module and you want to deploy this training content in 5 different factories. So how are you going to manage the devices? Because you can't really, every time an update comes, you can't have people downloading these into, let's say 100 odd devices that's going to be spread across 5 factories. That's quite a, redundant process. Of course, there are today tools that are coming up for content management and device management, but I would say it was the pain point for the longest amount of time that was throttling the scale up of this particular technology. The second biggest factor is a lack of a clear cut design standard. When I mean design, I'm talking about the user experience and user interface, right? So today, when you open a mobile app, uh, doesn't matter what kind of app it is, if it's a car hailing app or a food delivery application, you know how the basic menu works and you know how the buttons work, right? You don't have to be taught the menu and the buttons in every app. And imagine if you had to, you're gonna quickly feel a fatigue of using applications, right? We don't have that kind of a standard of UX and UI designed for this particular new medium that's coming up. Every AR/VR applications are writing their own designs, and that's both a good thing and a bad thing. Good thing in a sense, yes, we are experimenting more, we are, being exposed to new ideas. But the bad thing is it also quickly turns into fatigue, and anything that's fatigue is not scalable. Imagine if you have thousands of workers who are going to use the VR application, and they use multiple other AR VR applications as part of their job, which is what all of us in the XR space would want to happen. And imagine if each of these applications carry their own UX and UI, we're not going to have users kind of like learning these, UX and UI on the go for each of these applications. That's just not going to happen.
As we also discussed that enterprises are not anymore facing the challenges of adoption but scaling. So, how do we see XR technologies influencing their traditional business models and operations that they are currently using?
Um, Okay, so that's a very tricky question to answer straight, because it's not like what GPS did for mobile computing, right? It's not like this particular technology enabled a lot of new business models to come up, like Uber and Zomato and so on. So we're not at that stage yet. We'll certainly be when there's a time that pure play AR VR companies and business models exist. But today, at least in the enterprise space, I see XR as an enabler that helps companies do whatever they do much better, faster, safer, and cost effective. So I'm not looking at any mass disruption in business models, but certainly the tool is completely gonna completely revamp the processes that are in place today.
So how are the actual players who are playing in the ground? I mean, those who are actually working in this industry towards establishing standards for seamless integration across, different XR platforms. So how are they working towards establishing that?
Great question there, Pooja. So we do have one such, or at least top of my mind, platform called the OpenXR platform. That's kind of
Hmm.
like the least common denominator SDK for all the XR devices out there. In a way that if you build for OpenXR, the content will should automatically work across all devices. But the only challenge, or I would say, the issue with that is because it's the least common denominator, it's also about what functionalities that are there that are common across the various OEMs, which means for the enterprises which are investing into these devices, regardless of what devices they invest in, they're not going to get the maximum potential of that device. They're only going to get the shared potential that is between that device and any other device in the market. So this I would say is kind of tugs back on the innovation, because the OEMs that are innovating and putting new features into the headset deserve the uptick in their sales, deserve to be leading in whatever position in the XR device market. And hence, I would say OpenXR is a double-edged sword right now. Though in some cases it does make sense, it doesn't kind of like feed into the overall OEM success. And we need that because we all live in a capitalistic world right now.
Yeah, let's also now discuss about the challenges. Now that we have discussed about the sort of good parts about it. So, what are the challenges that are associated while creating, sort of a unified XR ecosystem for enterprise applications?
Well, one thing is definitely the single sign-on. So if you're an enterprise space, you would understand what this is. Integrating a single sign-on authentication with VR, XR applications is definitely a must. Though it can be done today, it needs to be done in a very indirect manner. I'm not too sure. I might be wrong on that. There could be an update around that. But that's almost single-handedly the most needed enterprise integration functionality in the XR space, right? Uh, and then, of course, how do the content management systems that are going to be built, can they handle the required level of encryption, required level of security? Because unlike any other applications, right, an XR content being leaked out of a company is actually much more sensitive than any other data, because in an XR content you're going to obviously deal with the 3D model, right? Let's say an automobile company gets one of their VR applications stolen. What that means is the 3D models of their would be released car is now out there in the open, right? So it's quite sensitive topic. XR's biggest question, when we implement an enterprise, has always been the security aspects, and I think we need a lot of focus around that space to calm these questions.
Let's also give a bit of discussion towards design and development part of the XR application. So, how important is it that we need that human-centric design in the development of XR applications and especially for enterprise use? So, how important is it to approach it towards from a human-centric point of view?
Okay, so the question of human-centric design, I would say there's no other technology that is kind of built from ground up for that very same use case, which is human-centric design, other than XR, right? So what is XR? It's like, for the longest time, all of us have been using our fingers and touch to kind of like interact with computers. We had to learn software interfaces because we have like a functionality that's out there in the real world, but we condense that into an application that fits inside a monitor, and you need to use a keyboard and mouse for it or touch screen. This kind of like, induces a lot of learning curve on users on how to start using an application. But XR's supposed vision is supposed to break that, because when things are in 3D, you'll get things intentively. You get things much more seamlessly without any friction and learning curve, right? Uh, so I think by default the technology is already giving that platform, but I still see some examples and use cases out there, or some demos that kind of like put up just 2D user interfaces in the 3D space. Tremendous amount of drop downs and forms to fill, not really leveraging the platform and the immersiveness it offers, right? That kind of breaks my heart, but it's fine. I think people are experimenting, people are learning, and I think maybe it's a good start. Maybe people start from somewhere and they learn along the way.
Yeah. So now that we are also discussing about XR content and applications, how important is it that we need XR content to be customized to address specific challenges within that particular sector? So how important is it?
I truly believe it's very important because in my interactions with the customers, whenever they have procured off-the-shelf content, it's not quite useful, or doesn't solve the problem for them. Because let's take a step back, right? This customization has nothing to do with XR. It's all about a business case and the solution for it, right? And every problem statement is unique, every business case is unique, and so should be the solution. uh, Unfortunately, unlike the video games, you just can't create a content in XR and then expect it to sell like hotcakes, because not every, even in the same sector, even in the automobile space, no two car companies manufacturing process are the same. So hence the off-the-shelf content market, I'm not too sure it's long-term play, but I would say for a company to get reap its benefit on the investment it makes in XR, customized content is the way. Especially now that both the cost of hardware and content development is much more viable today than it was back in 2014.
Yeah. And how can that be done? Like, how can it be customized to address those specific challenges?
Well, that's where this entire aspect of solution design and like custom development comes into play. I'm pretty sure in the next 4 years, every digital office of OEMs and any enterprise companies will be exposed to the kind of solutions you can design and build in the XR space. It's not going to be too long before they know the technology as much as those in the ecosystem. In fact, they're very much part of the ecosystem by now, right? So when that happens, I think the ideas of approaching a problem statement from an XR angle is going to be coming from the enterprises themselves, instead of it coming from vendors and solution providers outside the enterprises.
What are the key trends and innovations according to you that we can expect in the future in terms of hardware, software, content creation? Where do you think the next phase of XR adoption in enterprise is going towards?
Great question, Pooja. So, my look at trends is not to get kind of like carried away, because, for the longest time, the trend was Apple's going to release its AI device. That trend stayed as a trend for about a good 8 years, So, I don't believe in trends, but what we can do is kind of look at, okay, the technology has already matured a lot, even in the last 8 years, right? So in 2014, you had to carry a big workstation to power an AR/VR device, but today, I'm sure AjnaLens also, has the standalone devices in their lineup, where the device doesn't need an external computing to kind of process the VR or AR content. So with that in place, the technology has already matured a lot, and I think today, instead of waiting for a future trend, enterprise should just start working on how can we implement the current status quo into our processes, etc. Uh, the trends, if at all any, in the next 5 years or 6 years, is going to be in terms of the sizes. It could be quite a few small improvements, but put together in the next 10 years, they could look big. like all the technology improvements that led to the standalone device market today. But it's not really prudent to get carried away by the trend curve of that.
So, before we end the podcast, any last thoughts you have on the whole discussion that we had, just to sum up the things?
Nothing else, Pooja, from my end. If you have any questions, of course, please go ahead.
Okay, okay. All right. I think we can end the episode here. So,
Yeah.
again, really, really grateful to you for taking your time out here and joining us here. So, yeah, thank you.